Hello, everyone listening out there on YouTube. Thank you for joining me for our Jack and Jill relationship series. So, I have had a recent rash of new clients and potential clients who are young, just starting out in life and their relationships, and they have found themselves in a committed relationship. And by committed, I mean some of them are married, some of them have decided to live together, and others have just decided to make this person their life partner. And regardless of what their status is, they have already found themselves in situations where they are questioning what it takes to make the relationship last and what it is that they can do to make the relationship stronger. In some cases, some people are asking what can they do to make themselves a better partner. In other cases, they are asking me questions like, should I stay in this or should I leave? Those questions have caused me to make a series on relationships. Something I know a thing or two about. I've been in a lot of them, and I have been in situations that I should not have been in. I have left situations before I've even worked to attempt to make them better. And then I've done some work to make myself a better partner and to make myself more accountable in relationships. So this series is primarily devoted to people who are in intimate couple relationships, although some of the things that we talk about you could definitely apply to some of your more platonic relationships. And hopefully this will be helpful to you. If you listen to this series and you decide you have a question for me that you don't want to put in the comments, you can always email me or contact me on social media. My email, admin, admin, at tsfcenter.com, or you can follow me, Dr. Freisen. And for most of the people, you have my cell phone number. You have some way to reach me, because that's why the series has even started, right? Because you have a means of reaching me. Just send me a question and I will address it in these series. Now, for those of you who want to work with me on coaching for you and your partner, that's available. You can reach out to me and we can discuss that. For some of you that you feel that your partner is not willing to have any coaching, then you might want to reevaluate the relationship. You can start with focusing on what you can do from your end to improve the relationship. And if you do everything that you need to do in a relationship is not fruitful, then you know that it is time to move on. I want to address a couple things that I notice in relationships. A lot of people get into relationships when they're young, meaning they're teenage years, in their 20s, and even in the first part of their 30s. And when they get into these relationships, situations happen, and I like to call them situationships come up. And the situationships come up, and what happens is when something occurs within the relationship, there really isn't a sense of healing from that particular incident. So throughout this series, you're going to hear me refer to the people in the relationship as Jack and Jill. Okay, Jack is going to represent the masculine energy and Jill is going to represent the feminine energy. So within a relationship, let's just say Jack and Jill get into an argument. And Jack and Jill get into an argument because Jack went and spent $1,000 on rims for his car, right? And the rent was due, and the rent was $1,200. They all of a sudden didn't have enough money for the rent, and Jill got mad, got into an argument with Jack, and it was all because the money was not spent appropriately. Jack gets mad, calls Jill's all kinds of things outside of her name. Jill calls Jack things outside of his name. And then they separate while Jill tries to figure out how to pay the rent. At some point, Jack comes back with the money to actually pay the rent that's outstanding. And the rent gets paid, and they reunite, and they go on as if nothing happened. Therein lies the basis of the next argument. Because at this particular moment, when they come back together, although the money is there to resolve the situationship, being the rent has to be paid, the underlying cause of the particular issue has not been addressed. There has not been any healing from the damage that was done during that particular argument. Now, of course, if someone was wise, and they would discuss money before they actually got into a living situation with a person. But that doesn't happen most of the time. Most of the time, we're caught up in, we love a person. Hey, I love you, you love me. Let's move together and be happy. And then when you start living with each other, you find out maybe Jill likes to spend all the money. Maybe Jack likes to spend all the money. But it's rarely that both people are on the same page. And it really doesn't matter who's making the most money. Let's just make sure we understand. It's not about who's earning the most. It's about not being on the same page when it comes to what to do with the money and where our priorities lie. And then once we have a big old fallout and we say really mean things to each other and we don't do anything to heal what was said, what was done, get to the bottom of it, we set ourselves up for a pattern of trauma and damage and trauma and damage and no healing. And when there's no healing of whatever the situation is, you cannot effectively move forward in a relationship. Now, what Jack and Jill really need to do in this case, and I'm going to say need to do, is to be able to sit down with each other and have a conversation about how the situation occurred. Meaning, what was it from their side, Jack's side, hey, I spent the money. Jill's side, hey, we didn't have the money. Jack's side, why did you yell at me? Jill's side, I can't handle this stress. Both parties would benefit from sitting down, having a conversation about expectations and ways that they can move forward and heal from this situationship, things they could do to prevent it from occurring in the future, and what it looks like for each person to be understood in this particular situation. If they do that, then they could move on. But there is a problem. Most of us go into relationships carrying trauma from our childhood or from another relationship. And because we carry that trauma, and most of us do not do the work and learn how to communicate with other people, we then end up repeating patterns. And we end up taking the trauma that we have and transferring the energy from that trauma over to our partner. So let's take the situation of Jack and Jill, and Jack spending $1,000. So perhaps Jack has some trauma from growing up poor, and while he was a young person growing up poor, he didn't have $1,000. He never was told about how to manage $1,000. And he thought to himself, when I get older and I have money, I'm going to buy the things that I want to buy, because I didn't get to do that when I was a kid. I never had shoes. I never had new clothes. I never had money. We didn't have food to eat. And when I get older, I'm going to have everything I want when I want it. So in Jack's mind, he has $1,000. He wants the rims. He's going to buy the rims. And he does. And then you have Jill, who grew up homeless at times, being evicted because her parents, single mom, or parents who were drug addicts, or parents who were just poor, whatever the situation is, they didn't have enough money. She was always having to move from one place to the next, stay with someone else, because they were always being evicted because they couldn't pay the rent. They never had enough money for the rent. So she has a fear of being homeless as an adult. And when she was a kid, she said, this is never going to happen to me. I will never be in this situation. When I get older, I'm going to make sure I pay my rent, and I pay it on time. Every time, no matter what. Both people are dealing with trauma from their childhood, and they are dealing with it in different ways. And because they did not have a conversation, or at least reach an understanding as a result of a conversation of what that trauma looks like in their life and how it presents itself, they are unable to adequately deal with it when Jack's trauma meets Jill's trauma head on. And then they begin to clash. And one would think they're clashing because he spent $1,000 when they needed $1,200, but it's actually deeper than that. That's the surface. So sometimes you have to stop and look at your partner and say, why did you do that? Why did you spend the money? Sometimes you have to look at your partner and say, why are you so upset? Why does this bother you? Why does this hurt you? And once you start having those conversations of the why, and truly seeking to understand the why, you have a better chance of having a fruitful relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be other things that come up, but it means that every time something else comes up, you're going to have this conversation. You're going to have to reach this understanding each and every time, until things are kind of smooth the majority of the time. Now, when you have the conversation, people react differently. Some people have emotions that they kind of explode and they start yelling, and then other people are calm and they don't like to yell, they don't like to argue. And some people, they stop talking to you because they don't want to deal with the situation. Other people, they start punching holes in walls because they are so upset about the situation. There's different ways to deal with those things, which a lot of that needs more than just a conversation with a spouse or a partner or a boyfriend, girlfriend. Some of that requires individual work with a therapist, a counselor, someone else that could help a person deal with anger and different things of that nature. But aside from that, you can actually do things within your relationship to improve your communication with your partner, and you can do things to help them understand who you are. You can't do any of that if you don't know who you are and if you don't know why you have trauma. So the first thing I think most people would benefit from doing is to ask themselves, why did this bother me so much? Why am I angry because of this action? How does this make me feel? Is this something that I am overreacting to? Is this something that I should have a different response for? Was I over the top in how I approached my partner? When I said those things that were hurtful to my partner, did I mean to hurt my partner? Was what I said true? And even if it were true, did I need to say it? How would I feel if this was done to me? What is it that my partner was trying to get out of the conversation that we had? What is it that they wanted me to understand? Now, these are questions that are good questions, and they would help you to start to make things better in your relationship. Asking yourself these questions will not resolve all of your issues in one argument. But if you consistently do a self-evaluation and then do an evaluation as a couple, you will make improvements in your relationship, in your way of communicating with each other, in your understanding of each other as a person. Doing all of that, you will be able to have a fruitful relationship as long as you actually love a person and are committed to being with that person. Of course, there's some things that you cannot overcome and you should not even attempt to overcome. I'm not an advocate for staying in relationships that are violent in nature because that just doesn't turn out well. But some of these other things can be overcome, can be worked out if you do the work. So I hope this video, this message helps you. And if it does, like and share it with someone else who may benefit from it. If you have questions you want to put in the comments, feel free to do so. If you want to send me a message, one of the other ways, send me a message and we can go forward. And I will try to assist you as much as I can. Until next time, be well.